Hello and welcome to my painting video. In this video I will be painting a Crypt Horror from the Flesh Eater Courts. I'll use this model in a warband for Warcry. As a big fan of cannibal movies, it's not surprising that I would love to paint up some ghouls. This Crypt Horror is a great way to paint something nasty, gnarly and disgusting. Let's begin. I start off with Wraithbone Primer. The way I paint my ghouls, you can actually use whichever primer you like. I tend to either start with a grey or white primer most of the time. For the first step, I'm going to basecoat the entire skin with Rakarth Flesh. I want the skin to look unhealthy pale. This is achieved very well by using Rakarth Flesh as a basecoat. No need to be careful hitting other parts though, you can always clean up afterwards. For the next step, I'll be washing all the skin with Carroburg Crimson. The red purplish color will be a great shade for our sickly looking skin. Again, no need to be careful with this step. Now I'm going to bring back the layer of Rakarth Flesh on the raised areas of the skin. Make sure that the Carroburg Crimson wash is still visible in the recesses. Next, I'm going to highlight the skin in two steps. For the first step, I'll be using Pallid Wych Flesh. I go over all the raised areas again, but this time I will only highlight parts which I think will be hit by light. The color might seem very bright, but once it dries it will blend more with the base coat. For the last highlight, I'll be using the color White Scar. This will be the same as the previous step, except I'll be painting very thin lines. This step that I'm going to show you now is optional. I like my ghouls looking gnarly and dirty, but if you're already happy with the skin tone, you can skip this step. I'll be using 3 parts of Lamia Medium and 1 part of Agrax Earthshade to create a very thin wash. This wash I will use over the entire skin. And here we have some dirty looking pale skin. I'll add some final touches, but I'll get to that at the end of this video. For the next couple of steps, I'll be using contrast paints. I'll be using Wraithbone as my base on all these parts. The areas that will be covered are the hair, the exposed bones, teeth and claws. For the hair, I'll be using the contrast paint Black Templar. I want the hair to be black with a blue highlight. The first highlight for the hair will be Dark Reaper. You could try a dry brushing technique here, but I tend to use a small brush to paint the highlights. For the final highlight, I use Thunderhawk Blue. The hair is now done and has a nice looking black bluish color. In the previous step, I already base coated all the bone, teeth and claws with Wraithbone. The contrast paint that will be used here is Skeleton Horde. With this contrast paint, I tend to use 2 coats to bring a bit more contrast on the flat surfaces. And that is all it takes to get some good looking bone, teeth and claws. As an additional step, you could highlight everything with some Ushabti bone, but since everything will be covered in gore and blood, I tend to skip this step. Now it's time to paint the muscle tissue hanging from the spine. For the base coat I used Mephiston Red. Try not to hit the spine too much. I'm going to use Carroburg Crimson to give some shading to the muscles. You can also add some shading to the surrounding skin. I'm giving the muscles 2 highlights. The first highlight will be Evil Sunz Scarlet. Just paint all the raised areas. For the final highlight, I'll be using Pallid Wych Flesh. Just a thin line over the raised edges will be fine. With the muscle tissue complete, it's time to bloody up this ghoul. To bloody up this ghoul, I used the texture paint Armageddon Dunes to create some gory patches on its stomach and its arms. When we cover this in blood, it will look like he has some bits of gore still stuck to him. For a bloody effect, I always use Blood for the Blood God. It looks great straight out of the pot and it's easy to use. In order not to make the entire model completely red, I tend to have very little paint on my brush while applying this technical paint. Use an older brush to get a more streaky effect. For my ghouls, I tend to cover their entire claws and lower arms, their mouths and stomachs to give the impression they've been feasting on some corpses. The first step in painting the base is using the technical paint Armageddon Dunes. You can use whichever texture paint you want here, as I'll be painting it with a contrast paint. The next step is to wash the base with some Agrax Earthshade. Because I'm planning on using these ghouls for Warcry, I want the base to be similar in color to the playing field. That is why I use the contrast paint Leviadon Blue. In addition, this will give a nice contrast to the pale looking ghoul. As a final touch, I will give a dry brush of Thunderhawk Blue to make the base pop more. Finally, I will paint the rim of the base with Dark Reaper. And here we have a finished Crypt Horror for my Warcry warband. These are fun models to paint, and I think this pale looking skin looks a bit more horrific than the greenish skin that you can see on the official boxes. With these models it's fun to go nuts with the gore, but you can also dial it back and make them a bit cleaner if you so desire. Thanks for watching.